So I want to dig into that topic now, is what that progression from beginner to, we'll say, master, and then we'll talk about what it takes to go from master to grandmaster. So let's say you get somebody walks in the door, they go to the gun shop, they buy their very first gun, whatever it is, and they come to a class, which I know in today's world is not often the very first thing they're going to do after they buy something. Well, let's assume they did walk into a class and say, I need to learn how to do this. Beyond the basic safety rule, what's the first thing you're going to tell them?
If I have a chance to, I'm going to show them how to pull the trigger. I'm going to show them how to grip the gun properly. I'm going to try to impress upon them the importance of dry fire and mastering the fundamentals as much as they can before they try and get too far into other things. I want you to be able to pull that gun out and put a bullet pretty much exactly where you want it at most distances, up to probably farther than most people think. It's not hard to do. It isn't hard to do. It's just people don't understand the focus that is required, and really just there's some technique things that people don't understand.
I want to rewind a little bit because you mentioned getting into the proper dry fire. So another friend of mine, Justin, goes by Graveyard Fields, runs Swiss Island Deadly. He and I talked about this one time where he likes to call it dry practice, where instead of just dry fire is kind of the old school implies, like, let me balance, just put the coin on the muzzle of my thing and pull the trigger over and over again like a bullseye shooter. Where his point was, well, in reality, there's a whole lot you can practice that's not just the pulling the trigger part. I mean, everything from the draw speed to transitions to reloads, like all this stuff can be done with a par timer. And if you put in time every day, like that's how you can get better and doesn't cost you anything.
So I give people two types of dry fire if they're brand new. The first type of dry fire is essentially what I was saying, right? Learn to press the trigger without moving the gun. Just learn your gun's trigger. And this is something you can do at the range. When you go shoot, if you're missing, right, low left, unload the gun, do a little bit of that. Once you get that down, right, yes, move on. The dry practice that your friend's referring to is the vast majority of what most professional shooters are doing in dry fire practice. They already know how to press the trigger cleanly. They don't have to think about it anymore for the most part, right? So once you're beyond that, yes, you need a shot timer. Shot timer is probably the most important investment in your performance shooting training, right? Use a shot timer. For dry practice only, you set par times for the shot timer, right? The first beep tells you when to start the thing you're practicing. Maybe it's a draw from holster, right? The second beep is when you should be completing the action. So you figure out how fast you can do a thing correctly. And that's your baseline. And then you start lowering the par times incrementally, right? By a tenth, maybe 2/10. And you start trying to complete that drill quicker, right? By beating that second beep. And that's how you use par times. You chase aggressively lower and lower par times. And this forces you to go faster, right? And you do this incrementally so that you can find the place where you start failing to beat the par time and you work there for a while. You can video yourself, right? And you figure out where your inefficiencies are. Where's the hitches in your technique? Where are you falling short? What can you do faster, sooner, more efficiently? And this method of dry practice you can apply to draws from holster, transitioning across multiple targets, reloads, movement, right, between positions, everything. You can apply this. You can apply this to pulling a tourniquet out and applying a tourniquet, for instance, and pushing these par times lower and forcing yourself to go faster than you think you can is how you get better. All right, and this is the process. It's actually fairly simple and straightforward. It's just that people don't push themselves in speed. So, for instance, I ask people all the time that want to learn how to get their gun out and shoot a round accurately faster. I say, okay, do you dry fire? And they're like, yeah, I dry fire. Some people are like, yes, I dry fire all the time. And I say, okay, what's your normal draw from holster dry fire par time? And they're like, well, I don't know, a second and a half. I try to get like maybe 1.4, 1.3 seconds. And I'm like, Okay. All right, fine. We'll start at a second and a half. I'll start you off where you think you are, and we'll do that. And I'll have them do it a few times, and yeah, and they're nailing it. And I'm like, okay, let's lower it now. You're making the part time. We lower it a tenth. They do it, no problem. I lower it another tenth. They do it, no problem, right? And I'm like, all right, you're making this, no problem. Let's lower it even more, right? And I don't tell them necessarily what the time is. And now we're at a second. They're having to move their hands a little bit faster, but they're making it. And I'm like, all right, good, keep going. I lowered a little more. Before you know it, I'm at zero point 0.6, zero point 0.5, and they're like lightning fast drawing on target, right? They're right there or they're almost right there. This is like 5-10 minutes of dry fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I show them the timer at the end. And they're like, what was that? And I'm like, you're at half a second. You're right there. And they're blown away.